Oh, sorry, I stand corrected.
Vinyl is the plural of vinyl.
Back to your vinyl then. And I'm not talking about your trousers.
Remember that.
Okay, no, I've learned something today. Thank you, Jeremy.
Okay, bud, take care.
Jeremy Taylor, by day record seller, by day and by night too rugby writer. It is 4.5 minutes to 5. Many people are leaving winter behind and heading to tropical places like the islands of Bali. I believe close to or just over 1 million Australians travel to Bali every year. Proposed laws are, if proposed laws in Indonesia are approved, that the popular tourist spot may become a risky place to holiday, especially if you're unmarried. Listen to this. The laws being considered by Indonesia's parliament would see unmarried people who have sex jailed. Not a great tourism promotion, I wouldn't have thought.
No. I mean, interestingly, it doesn't put people off going to places like Dubai, where exactly the same rules apply, and in fact people go there and fairly openly flout it. I mean, this to me is a broader issue, that we are increasingly travelling to countries such as Indonesia or the Middle East, which have got different moral values and codes to us, and kind of expect we can just behave in exactly the same way as what we can at home without any repercussions. So I just think it's a matter of being respectful where you're travelling and recognising and acknowledging that there may be different cultural standards in the country.
If you want our tourist dollar, you've got to play the game as well.
That's
right?
fair enough. I mean, if you don't want to go to, if you don't want to abide by that, there's lots of other tropical countries you can go to.
That's right. It's for the Indonesians to decide.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be telling them how to run their country, despite the fact that I think most of us would agree that these are very highly regressive policies that they're initiating. But, my thought originally just naturally went to, well, how are they going to police all of these things?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, how's any of that ever been policed in the past? What, you sort of dive into people's bedrooms and...
Well, and I imagine what will happen.
See people holding hands and ask for some proof of marriage?
Do you have to take your marriage certificate with you wherever you go?
I mean, I imagine what will happen, right, is the reality of what happens in places like Dubai, where if it's an unmarried couple, you sleep together in your hotel room, there's no issues. If you go do it on the beach or somewhere public when you're drunk, you will rightly be arrested and will face the repercussions.
Yeah.
It's a pity, though, that people expressing love for each other have this problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen,
am I missing something?
I completely disagree with it, but I don't really think it's my kind of my position to go and preach to the Indonesians about what they can or can't do in their own country.
All right. Along with other changes that they're proposing is it will be illegal to spread communist ideology. Anyone disagree with that? Curbing access to abortion, criminalising fake news.
That would be a hard one to define.
This is in no particular order, by the way.
No, it's a great list of laws.
Bestiality.
Oh, that's a relief.
And black magic.
Gosh, imagine if you got arrested for all of the above.
No one's going to turn up there anymore.
No,
they better start building more prisons.
Yeah. But I mean, okay, it's fair enough when in Rome, but if you've made a good business and you've made yourself attractive to Western visitors, it seems crazy to...
No, absolutely. I mean, it seems incredibly...
To work against that.
Yeah.
I mean, there are jobs involved and a whole industry involved.
Especially when you've got the Indonesian president saying he wants to, create 10 new Balis around Indonesia as part of their economic growth strategy. It doesn't seem like a very good way to approach it.
I'd be surprised, to be honest, if it changes numbers going to Bali at all.
I think people would sort of just turn a blind eye to it.
I mean, that bomb going off didn't stop people for long, did it?
No,
and that was hundreds of people affected there.
Yeah.
Oh, I can hear the music. I think that means that we're getting pretty close to winding things up. That went real quick. Nice to have you guys on the panel. Nice to be here and be doing it this afternoon for Wallace.
Great to be here.
So thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Paul.
And have a great weekend, you guys.
You too.
Checkpoint is next on RNZ National.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, it's game on. We go live to Tokyo ahead of tonight's opening ceremony and the All Blacks campaign for a Rugby World Cup trifecta. Have you worked out how to watch the games and if your internet's got enough juice to cope? A damning report into the housing crisis in central Otago gives greedy landlords a serve. Police seize more than 200 kilos of meth worth $86 million in a Trans-Tasman bust. Are New Zealand and Australia becoming a target for foreign drug syndicates? The Ritchie's bus company is ordered to pay $750,000 in reparations following a fatal Christmas Eve crash.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with DNA. A report has laid bare the hardship being faced by many people in central Otago. The Southern DHB commissioned research earlier this year after hearing anecdotal evidence of housing-related hardship in the district. Timothy Brown has been reading the draft report.
The report says a lack of affordable housing has reduced many residents' quality of life, affecting their families, finances, health and sense of home. It says overcrowding is a growing problem, and some people are now homeless and sleeping rough. The report says some families are sleeping in tents at campgrounds, which in turn is affecting children's emotional well-being and school performance. Families fortunate enough to find rentals are settling for places too small for them, and with such high rent they can't afford to heat their homes. The report recommends the development of a district housing action plan. Ko Timothy Brown, TNA.
Those on the front line of Queenstown Lake's housing affordability crisis say the problem is too big to be solved locally. Average property values are close to $1.2 million, and the average three-bedroom rental is now about $750 a week. Stories of low-income workers sleeping shifts in shared beds or resorting to sleeping in cars are common. Julie Scott from Queenstown Lake's Community Housing Trust says the district has done all it can to fix the problem locally, but now needs government intervention in the form of more social housing. Housing New Zealand says it currently owns and manages 13 properties in the district, but demand is very low and it has no plans for more. Police say New Zealand drug users are being targeted by international criminals because they're prepared to pay such a high price. More than 200 kilograms of methamphetamine has been seized in raids in Waikato and Bay of Plenty in what the police say was a Trans-Tasman operation. Detective Inspector Paul Newman says the haul, worth more than $86 million, is one of several since July that together have taken more than a tonne of drugs out of circulation. They were most likely imported from Central America. Mr Newman says New Zealand and Australia are seen as an increasingly attractive marketplace by overseas crime syndicates.
If you were to pick up a kilo of methamphetamine in a place like Mexico, it would cost you around $4,000 US. If you put it over the border into the United States, about $40,000. But if you ship it to New Zealand or Australia, you're looking at anywhere between $100,000 and $150,000.
3 men have been arrested, 2 New Zealanders and an Australian. The Prime Minister says it's up to young people and their parents to decide whether it's acceptable to skip school in the name of climate change action. Millions of young people across the globe are striking today to demand urgent measures to stop environmental catastrophe. Thousands of school students around New Zealand are expected to take to the streets next Friday for climate strike action here. Jacinda Ardern says she's proud to be part of a government that has heard the call for change.
What I do acknowledge is that this is a generation that is more affected than any by climate change and see the need, of course, for us to be acting.
Jacinda Ardern is currently in Japan for trade talks and the Rugby World Cup before heading to New York for the United Nations General Assembly. Immediate steps are being taken to ease the backlog of prisoners waiting to be sentenced in the district courts. The acting Chief District Court Judge has allocated an extra 8 weeks of judges' time in Auckland, Manukau and Christchurch for sentencing remand prisoners. Jonathan Mitchell reports.
As well, Judge John Walker has directed lawyers to make sure sentencing dates are met and court time is not wasted. He says prisoners on remand account for more than 1/3 of the prison population. He says about 1,200 are waiting to be sentenced. Judge Walker says all parts of the district courts are under pressure and resources are being shifted around to relieve pressure points. He says the provision of 12 extra judges in this year's budget is helpful. Ko Jonathan Mitchell, tēnei.
The Chief Executive of the New Plymouth Council says he has no regrets about choosing a poop emoji and the slogan "Give a shit and vote" to publicise the local government elections. The smiling turd emoji appeared on the council's website, Facebook and billboards today, flushing out a torrent of comments, the majority negative. Craig Stevenson says the $30,000 campaign is designed to be provocative.
We expected it would spark a reaction, and it has. We're trying to spark a conversation. We're trying to shake people out of their apathy. Our voter numbers have been declining 3% a year for the last 10 years, so we really want to shift the dial on that.
Craig Stevenson says the turnout at the last election was just 47%, so the council is determined to get more people to vote this year, and especially youth. Voting ballots begin being posted out in New Plymouth today, and the election closes at noon October the 12th. It's coming up to 5:05. 4 years after their historic World Cup win over South Africa, the victory continues to motivate the Japanese rugby side. The Brave Blossoms play Russia in the tournament opener in Tokyo tonight, and their New Zealand skipper Michael Leach says they still reflect on that win over the Springboks at the 2015 tournament.
In 2015, everyone expected us to lose. Even the Japanese public expected us to lose. But when we beat South Africa, all eyes were on us. This time round, home World Cup, we've got an opportunity to inspire Japan again.
The match kicks off at 10:45pm. Australia don't think so, but Netball New Zealand maintain there's still value in sending the Silver Ferns to play in the inaugural Nations Cup in England in January. The Australians aren't playing in the tournament, allowing their players time away from the game, but Netball New Zealand's head of high performance, Keir Hansen, says not going never crossed their minds.
It's good to have that international competition with England and South Africa, and Jamaica taking part this time around is going to add another element again, which will be really valuable for our players.
Manchester United have made a winning start to their Europa League football campaign with a 1-0 win over Astana of Kazakhstan at Old Trafford. Arsenal had a 3-0 win over German side Eintracht Frankfurt. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Diane Swan, the voice behind everything from When the Cat's Away to The Bads, selects the mixtape. Country Life follows a day in the life of a truffle dog. Highlights of Silver Scrolls Past fills out our Friday Night Live act, because this week's element, Xenon, comes in handy in a flashbulb. We have a sonic tonic dedicated to photography on Night's Radio About Pictures with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow for Northland, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Cloudy periods, isolated showers gradually clearing and fine breaks increasing tomorrow. Auckland, cloud clearing and becoming fine. For the remainder of the North Island, fine weather, apart from cloud morning and night, and isolated showers in Taihape and Wellington tonight. Nelson, Buller, Westland and Fiordland, fine weather but isolated showers developing in Fiordland and Westland tomorrow. For Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mostly fine. However, areas of cloud and isolated showers for North Canterbury and the Kaikoura coast tonight. Chatham Islands partly cloudy, a few showers developing late tomorrow. RNZ National, it's coming up to 8 minutes past 5.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. After the build-up and preamble, the Rugby World Cup finally kicks off tonight with the opening ceremony and the first match between hosts Japan and Russia in Tokyo. The game is a sellout, as is most of the tournament, and the Japanese are hoping home advantage will count as they try to make the knockout stages of the World Cup for the first time. Their coach is former All Black and proud New Zealander Jamie Joseph, and while they're expected to easily account for Russia, the Brave Blossoms aren't used to being favourites. And I
consider us to be the favourites. We've never been the favourites. Thankfully, I don't read the Japanese newspapers because I don't understand kanji, so that doesn't affect me personally. We've got a lot of respect for Russia. We were very lucky to win the last time we played Russia.
And Japan halfback Yutaka Nagari admits he and some of the other Brave Blossoms are feeling the nerves. However, Japan assistant coach, another former All Black, Tony Brown, says the All Blacks have helped confidence levels for his team. It's a huge occasion for the team from the host nation, but Brown says the players' nerves will be eased thanks to a recent match against his countrymen.
The players played here last year against the All Blacks, so I don't think we've got any problem with them being too nervous against Russia, so it's not an issue for us. Just really looking forward to the game. It's going to be an exciting opportunity for our players to play in the World Cup.
And our rugby reporter Joe Porter is outside Tokyo Stadium in the fan zone and joins us now via live view. Oh, you got a bunch of friends there, Joe. What is the atmosphere like ahead of the opening ceremony and the opening game?
Yes, konnichiwa. We have some Japanese fans here behind us, and the Brave Blossoms fans are here in numbers, I can tell you that. It's a sold-out match, as you mentioned here, and the atmosphere is wonderful outside Tokyo Stadium. The sun is shining, it's incredibly hot. I'm having to wipe sweat off my brow as we speak, and the fans are so hospitable. Everywhere I've gone, they've been so welcoming, and of course, they kick the tournament off tonight with the opening ceremony. We're going to have some Air Force in the air doing some spectacular sky show, a whole bunch of local performers and artists and acts inside the stadium for the opening ceremony, and that's of course followed by the opening match between host Japan and Russia, and of course Japan are expected to win that game and get their World Cup campaign off to a flying start.
For those of us who are just listening to you, Joe is standing there with a bunch of fans who are dressed in their Japan jerseys, and they've got their flag out looking super enthusiastic. Joe, you mentioned the heat. It does look pretty warm over there. What's that going to mean? Slippery ball?
Well, yes, that's right. The humidity. It's almost 100% humidity here every day. So it'll mean a very greasy ball, a lot of dew on the ground. So skill sets will be very important. Some teams, Wales have been training with baby oil rubbed over the rugby balls. The All Blacks have been using hoses to make them incredibly wet, just to try and adjust to what will be some very slippery and dewy conditions with the ball here in Japan. So even tonight, with the sun shining above, we can still expect those very dewy, slippery ball conditions. So it does make it slightly unique here, those conditions, but there should be hard, fast running rugby if it stays sunny like this.
So is it going to be a good night for Japan? Are they expected to win?
Yes, they are. Like Jamie Joseph said, they're not really used to being favourites, a Tier 2 nation, but they are monstrous favourites to beat Russia. And Japan have had a great run of results this year. They smoked Tonga earlier this year. They've had another couple of good results. They won the Pacific Nations Cup. They're in really good form and have had a wonderful build-up, much more comprehensive than they used to. So they are heavy favourites to win this game. They're expected to win comfortably and sort of draw first blood in this World Cup. They've got a tough pool. If they are to make the quarterfinals, they've got to get past Scotland and Ireland and qualify first or second in their group. Likely to qualify second, perhaps they can edge Scotland. I think Ireland will qualify top, but if they edge Scotland and New Zealand win with their pool, of course they play South Africa tomorrow night in their first pool game. If New Zealand win their pool and Japan comes second, it will be an All Blacks Japan quarter-final, which would be just spectacular for the host nation.
Are you allowed to go to the opening ceremony this evening, Joe?
I am indeed. I'm allowed inside the ground, which will be lovely. I'll get to soak up that atmosphere and experience that vibe. I'm actually going to be doing a live cross into Lately tonight with Karen Hay to describe exactly what has happened inside the stadium. I'm very much looking forward to it. I'm very much looking forward to Japan's first game and actually getting the rugby started. We've had a lot of preamble, a lot of build-up, and now we finally get to kick things off.
Thank you, Joe. That's Joe Porter from the Fan Zone with a bunch of fans to boot. It looks like it's going to be a great game this evening. Joe will be inside the stadium and, as he said, we'll keep you updated this evening. And rugby fans will be holding their breath tonight as the Rugby World Cup kicks off. And it's not necessarily the score they will be worrying about, but Spark Sport's live streaming of the matches and whether fans will have enough internet bandwidth to support it. Andrew McRae reports.
Japan play Russia in tonight's first game after the official opening in Tokyo. It'll be the first time the tournament has been live streamed online in this country. Spark says it's ready to go and is confident in its ability to offer a great World Cup experience for viewers. It's encouraging people who want to watch the rugby on Spark Sport to make sure they're ready well in advance and to test the system in case they encounter any unexpected hitches in their home setup. Craig Young from the Telecommunication Users Association says he thinks Spark has done all it can, but the big question is just whether viewers are ready to live stream.
Much more complex situation to get themselves ready than, say, for example, when rugby moved to Sky. So that's probably where my major concern lies at the moment.
He says while it's not too difficult getting it up and running, it may prove harder for the less tech-savvy.
So you need to figure out, if you have a smart TV, do you have the app on the TV? Have you actually bought the service from Spark Sport? Now, of course, if your TV's not smart, you need an app on a phone or an iPad or some sort of device. So there is a number of steps.
The real test for Spark Sport will be the first All Black match tomorrow night when they meet South Africa in Yokohama. Alan Crome from Hamilton plans to stream the games through Spark, but he hasn't yet bothered to test the system.
So the first test will be, probably half an hour before the game.
Which is a bit of a risk.
Oh yeah, I guess so. No, I'm sort of internet savvy, so it should all be fine, I think.
Spark is certainly suggesting customers try it beforehand.
Yeah, Yeah, I'm not one of those people. I'll just go straight into the game. Yeah, I'm pretty confident it'll all work out. I've got no issues there.
His friend Toby Hutchins is in two minds about signing up to Spark's streaming service.
And I don't know if I have confidence in their streaming service to deliver at the scale we need it to be honest.
Why is that?
I think they're new at this, and I think we've seen before, especially in the early days when Sky started streaming, that there's a lot of failures just around the demand on the platform. And I think that's part of the learnings, and I suspect that Spark will probably go through those same learnings.
One Napier man spoken to by RNZ says he signed up to Spark Sport for $89 but found the process a bit hard.
Very frustrating. I finally got it when I got through and rang them.
Are you worried how the service might perform during a game?
No, I think it's pretty sussed out. But
You were mad the other day when I came home.
yeah, it was a bit awkward in places, I guess.
This Christchurch man signed up to Spark so he could see all the games live.
It was pretty straightforward, but on the TV it was very painstaking because you had to use the cursor to get across, so it might have been easier on some... No, it was on my phone, was it? No, it was on the TV.
No, TV
It was difficult anyway. But we got the end result, which we were after.
Others in Christchurch aren't so happy.
Because it's too dear, could be inefficient, not so good.
Will you be using Spark services to watch the Rugby World Cup?
Absolutely not. Because why should I have to pay to listen to our New Zealand team going to when we pay enough in taxes and sponsorship? Absolutely not. And I'm not at all impressed.
I think they've made it very difficult for people who are not up to speed with technology to be able to easily get to it. I've got a few years under my belt, and it becomes more and more difficult to manage the technology to do the simple things. Therefore, I'll be watching the delayed broadcast on TV1.
No, I won't be.
Why is that?
Oh, because it's in the middle of the night half the time, so I just tape it and watch it in the morning. Don't have the internet at home, so I have it at work, so that's all.
Craig Young from Tuan says people leaving signing up to Spark Sport to the last minute do so at their own peril.
This is what happened in Australia with the FIFA World Cup when Optus had the streaming rights, and suddenly there was this big chunk of people that tried to sign up on the night that it opened, and they had a big failure. And we just do not want to see that happen in New Zealand for all sorts of reasons.
He says the live streaming needs to be successful.
We want people to realise that the technology in New Zealand and our networks can cope with this and can actually deliver a good service. And it's a big punt to take on such a large game as being the way to bring streaming sports to New Zealand.
Spark Sport says it's made a massive investment in broadband and mobile infrastructure around the country and its collaboration with TVNZ and Sky Sport to prepare for the Rugby World Cup and make it accessible for the vast majority of New Zealanders. For Checkpoint, Ko Andrew McRae-Tene.
And Spark declined to be interviewed on Checkpoint tonight, but let us know how you're going with this, whether you've managed to hook up to Spark services, have you had any hitches, have you managed to suss it out yet? How easy was it? We'd love to hear from you. You can text us on 2101 or you can email us at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is about 18 minutes after 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Those at the front line of Queenstown Lakes and Central Otago's housing crisis say the problem is now too big to be solved locally. They say legislation is hamstringing authorities and reliable solutions are disappearing. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown has the story.
Central Otago's Mayor Tim Cadogan can remember when the district was an affordable place for a family to move and start a new life. He did it himself, but he says times have changed and housing affordability is the biggest issue confronting the district.
Without hesitation, hands down, it's the biggest issue facing the district. It's keeping a lot of people on the breadline. It is keeping a lot of people away. And I can cite middle management jobs where people were actually chosen for the job, came here and went, I'm not going to be 45 and settle myself with an even bigger mortgage to move here. Thanks very much, but no thanks. And that's just not one or two stories like that. There are many stories.
Tim Cadogan says even when the district has attempted to do something about it, they've been faced by red tape. He took the example of the Pines, a council reserve on the outskirts of Alexandra, which it hoped would provide new development and, more importantly, new homes to cater for the district's residents. but he says attempts to earmark it for the community have been stopped by red tape.
It's as frustrating as all get up. So we've got a large block of land in Alexandra that the council held under the Reserves Act. We sent that back to the Crown in February 2017 with a note attached saying we really need this for growth. We need this land to be freed up to go to the market so that we can have some expansion. That's still sitting somewhere in a desk in Wellington. That is very slow.
Even more frustrating is the fact the land won't necessarily be developed for the good of the community.
Once that land does go to the market, even though the community through its council has said we need this for growth, it could still get, if Ngāi Tahu don't pay market value for it, if they don't take it up, then it goes to the market. Somebody could buy it and sit on it and do nothing, or drip feed 10 sections a year at inflated prices and keep the values up.
Land Information says preparing the land for sale has been a complex process traversing 3 pieces of legislation, and the time taken to resolve the transaction is usual considering the complexity. Land Information has started discussions with Ngāi Tahu, who have the first right of refusal under their treaty settlement, and hope to complete the process by the end of March. Environment Minister David Parker says the government plans to comprehensively overhaul the Resource Management Act. He says it's not the sole cause of the housing crisis, but planning rules are partly to blame, with good outcomes curbed by onerous restrictions. But it's not the only issue facing those in the area. Queenstown Lakes Community Housing Trust's Executive Officer, Julie Scott, says many of their affordable housing projects have been possible due to special housing areas, introduced by the previous national government.
I think our council needs to be commended for what they did here. So they had the foresight to say, well, hang on a minute, let's amend this lead policy so that any SHA applicants have to make a contribution to the Community Housing Trust. And that originally went from 5% up to 10%. So that's really significant in terms of contribution of housing coming across to the trust.
That legislation has now lapsed, and no further land will be developed as SHAs. Julie Scott says that means developers don't have the motivation to provide sections for affordable homes. Housing Minister Megan Woods says the government build program will change how and where houses are built, and also how the government helps people afford homes. Mrs Scott says the housing crisis has grown too big for the local community to handle itself.
Historically, there hasn't been a lot of state housing in the district, what we now call public or social housing, but I think that needs to increase.
Housing New Zealand says it currently owns and manages 9 properties in Queenstown and 4 in Wanaka. In addition, it has 10 in Cromwell, 7 in Alexandra and 1 each in Roxburgh and Clyde. A spokesperson says the demand for state housing remains very low in the area and there are no plans to build or buy more. For Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
And a new housing report paints a picture of greedy landlords exploiting tenants with inflated prices, adding to a housing affordability crisis in central Otago. The Southern District Health Board report is based on 25 interviews with 18 different agencies, including the Ministry of Social Development, Oranga Tamariki and local schools. It found booming migration is putting the squeeze on housing in the area, increasing inequality and decreasing the availability of quality housing. And according to some of those interviewed, that lack of availability is creating a power imbalance that some landlords are taking full advantage of. I asked Southern DHB's Medical Director, Dr Huel Lloyd, to describe the conditions some people are living in Central Otago.
There was 2 distinct cohorts, one that had really poor housing, so a lack of heating, extremely cold properties, there were mouldy, broken windows, cracked basins, and some without any power at all. And the other aspect of this then is when people struggle to afford the repayments for the mortgage because of the high mortgage repayments and the rent costs. What we see is that people start to suffer and start to pull back on the other amenities of living, and that came through in a number of ways. A lot of the people there were actually having overcrowding issues because they couldn't afford the property and the rent. So we had a lot of issues that we discovered through overcrowding and large families living together and having other people coming in to rent the property with you.
And it sounds like, sorry to interrupt, in terms of the survey, there was a significant number of people, it seems, who aren't even living in houses. Can you tell me about them?
Yeah, so you get when you have a boomtown, you get this displacement effect whereby you get a cohort of people who move down the housing ladder, and right at the bottom end of that is you have families and single-parent families living in campgrounds. We had stories of people living in tents with young children, living in camper vans within campgrounds, and we all know that Central Otago during the winter months is a pretty harsh environment to be living in that kind of accommodation.
Were you surprised by any of this?
Look, I think for a lot of people this will be really quite confronting. That when you travel through Central Otago and the Queenstown area, it is such a beautiful place, and there are such beautiful properties that you see, and then there's this kind of underbelly of suffering. And I think it is surprising to the people on the ground who do this kind of work and see these families every day. Clearly, it's not surprising, and that's what really triggered this research. We wanted to get an understanding of what that was like.
So one of the two main issues in a nutshell that you identified were availability and affordability. I'm interested in what the organisations you interviewed, what they had to say about the role of landlords and property managers in all of this. What comments came out?
Look, well, we tried to get a broad perspective of people interested in this area and who had concerns. Unfortunately, we didn't get any response. We invited the property managers to contribute to the piece of research, but unfortunately we didn't get a response for them, so we can't really get their perspective on it.
But what did people say about the role they are playing in the housing crisis? The ones that you did interview.
Clearly, what the model that we've got really is sort of like a profit-driven kind of housing model. So house prices are going up, rents are going up. Because when there's lack of availability, then you can increase the rent, and you'll always have another person wanting to come and use that property. So that creates this cycle of lack of investment, lack of upkeep in that property, and you get this fear happening with the tenants that they don't really want to complain, they don't want to really raise issues because they're very fearful that one, they might be evicted, or the rent might actually go up and they'll be forced out.
How would you characterise the behaviours of landlords from what you've seen in this report?
Look, I don't really want to comment on that. I think, one of the things that we've got to do going forward from this report is look at the findings, accept that, and then work collaboratively together to try and solve some of these problems for these very needy people.
Okay, let me put it another way.
I just think that finger pointing in this situation probably doesn't help. We really need to all work together to try and improve the housing stock and the quality of that housing stock for these people.
Under the section Power Imbalance and Landlord Behaviour in this report, these are some of the following comments that were made. This person says of landlords, they call it market value, I call it exploitation. Another comment, it's massive profiteering. The report goes on to say that availability via landlord price setting behaviour has created an affordability crisis in central Otago. Landlords are described as the winners, as being very greedy and exhibiting a flippant and just don't care attitude. Is that a fair characterisation of the behaviour of landlords that you're seeing in this area?
Look, I think it is very hard to ignore those words of the people living in these properties.
So what do you do about it?
Yeah, look, I think that's the difficult thing. Look, I don't think any one agency can really solve this problem, and that's where we come into this collaborative model of how do we all work together in this area to try and improve the housing stock and the quality.
But how can you work together with them when they won't even answer a survey?
So I think there's other housing provisions that we can think about. We can think about community housing. We can think about how does the district council look at it, trying to improve the numbers of social housing that is available. How can we improve the access to insulation and repairing of some of these properties? There's a whole heap of things that we can put in place to try and redress this.
Isn't approaching the landlords and property managers potentially offering you a more immediate solution? Are you going to make any attempts to open up some conversations with them about their behaviour?
Look, I think we're always open to discussions to see how we can try and improve the situation. Look, that's what we're hoping with the report, really, that we're really shining a light on that aspect of the housing market. And let's hope that they come to the party and help be part of the solution.
Is hope all you've got then when it comes to them?
Look, it's very hard to move them. They're independent people. We can legislate at various levels.
Is there a need? Is there a need for additional legislation around some of these behaviours then?
Look, we talk about that in some of the recommendations that we make from the report, and I think there is area for scope for some changes in the legislative framework there. Yes.
And that's Southern DHB's Medical Director, Dr. Huell Lloyd. Let us know what you think about that. Have you had any dealings with property managers or landlords in the area? How have you been treated and how easy is it to get a place to rent in central Otago? Love to hear from you. Text us 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, Ritchie's bus company has been ordered to pay $750,000 after a deadly Christmas Eve crash. Brownface, blackface and now an about-face for Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And police seize more than 200 kilos of meth worth $86 million in a Trans-Tasman bust. And a local body ad campaign featuring a poo emoji and the catchphrase, "Give a shit, vote today," causes a stink in New Plymouth. Let us know your thoughts on anything you've heard on the program tonight. A lot of you are getting in contact about Spark and the Rugby World Cup. This one in says, Spark Sport did not work at all on my Mac Safari browser. They told me they knew they had an issue, but it still says it works on their website. They are going to have a big issue if people wait till tomorrow night and then find it doesn't work and all ring at once. They didn't really seem bothered by all of this at all. Another person's got in touch to say, hiya, I had a very frustrating experience with Spark Sport. I'm an existing Sky broadband customer, full stop, with fibre. I purchased the Spark Sport Rugby World Cup package in May. I got sent the first email about getting the tournament pass in late August. When I went to get the tournament pass, it said I had already purchased, so I couldn't follow the steps online. From there, it took 3 weeks of emails and talking with 3 different people at Spark, long waits on the phone to work out that they had to refund the money that I had paid in May, so I could then pay again to then get the tournament pass, but they would reimburse me. The whole process was hugely frustrating and left me very concerned. I'm not sure I followed all of that, which is probably an indication of the fact that maybe it's just a little too complicated. Let us know your thoughts. Text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Time now to get to the headlines with Susanna.
Those at the front line of Queenstown Lakes and Central Otago's housing crisis say the problem is now too big to be solved locally. A new report by the Southern DHB says the lack of affordable housing has reduced people's quality of life, affecting their finances, health and sense of home. It says overcrowding is growing, with some families sleeping in tents and calls for a district housing plan. The police say drug users are being targeted by international criminals because they're willing to pay such a high price. More than 200 kilograms of meth worth over $86 million has been seized in Waikato and Bay of Plenty, and 3 men have been arrested. The police say the drugs probably came from Central America. Closing addresses have been heard at the High Court in Auckland in the trial of 2 people accused of torturing and murdering Auckland teenager Demetrius Pairama. Toko Ashley Shane Winter and Kerry Te Amo admit kidnapping the 17-year-old, but dispute their involvement in her death. Justice Brewer will sum up the case on Monday before the jury retires. A judge has criticised Ritchie's for not giving a driver a bus rental agreement before the 2016 Christmas Eve crash, which killed 3 people from a Tongan college band. Ritchie's was fined $210,000 in the Waitakere District Court today and ordered to pay $750,000 in reparations for failing to ensure people's health and safety was not put at risk. Judge June Hellas said Ritchie's failed to provide information about what to do and if something went wrong when hiring out buses to its drivers. A campaign to lower the voting age to 16 has launched outside Parliament this afternoon. Campaigner Pearson Palmer says issues that affect young people are trivialised by adults. The Prime Minister says the government is working on providing civic education in schools and making sure all those eligible do vote. A short, sharp earthquake has rattled Christchurch this afternoon. GeoNet says the widely felt 3.1 magnitude quake had a depth of 7 kilometres and was centred 5 kilometres east of Christchurch. More than 1,000 people have reported feeling it. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thank you, Susanna. If you've just tuned in, happy Friday. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen, and it's time now for Business with Madison Reedy. Madison Super Fund has had its 5-yearly review. What does it say about how it's going?
Yeah, so every 5 years, in fact, the Treasury commissions an independent review of the guardians of the superannuation fund, the guardians being the managers of the super fund. Now, this time around, we had one this year. The last one was in 2014. Treasury hired the international firm Willis Towers Watson to do this review. Now, they found that the super fund's governance is exceptional. They found that its people and its investment strategies are excellent, and that's compared to other state-owned super funds around the world. Although the review did come up with a small handful of recommendations for our state-owned superannuation fund. Now, some of those, it told it to review its investment beliefs, values and strategic principles.
What does that mean?
Who knows what that one means? Basically, it told it's to align its beliefs with the same beliefs of its organisation and its board. So it just wants, I guess, consensus across the board when it comes to that one. One that is a little bit easier to understand, though, it did tell the super fund to review its compensation structure. That's what it pays its people, and not because the super fund pays too much, as we often see in a lot of companies around this country. It's actually because the super fund's pay is below average when it comes to international standards at super funds. Now, this review said that makes it difficult for the super fund to attract and retain good, talented staff, not to mention the fact that, we are in the small end of the world as well, so that also makes it trickier to bring global talented staff down here as well. Now, they told the super fund to suggest adding in other things to its employee value proposition, like talking up its culture and the purpose of the super fund to try and entice people to come and work for it. It interestingly also told it to bolster its resources in its responsible investment division. Now, the super fund does take this pretty seriously. It does have a head of responsible investment, and what they've actually done is they have actually within this division started to reduce and lessen their shareholdings in companies like oil production that incite climate change, and also things that are involved in things like modern slavery. Now, we should give you some figures here on the super fund as well. They did actually release their financial year annual figures this week. The super fund is now worth $43 billion. Now, that's a growth of $3.7 billion just in the 12 months to June, which is an increase of just over 7% for 12 months. Now, that's pretty good considering that the super fund, in fact, on Christmas Day, had actually lost a few $billion in the first half of the financial year, and that was just because of market volatility. Global markets kind of came tumbling down just before Christmas last year, but they managed to make up those losses and some extra gains on top of that as well.
Now, this next one's got me interested. So an economist is suggesting some kind of controversial idea to reduce congestion in our cities. What is it?
Yeah, this one is quite controversial, especially to the Aucklanders who are probably stuck in traffic driving home as we speak. So the principal economist at the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research, commonly known as NZIER, his name's Chris Nixon. Now, he reckons the time is now for the government of this country to introduce a congestion charge. He says that is the most efficient and fair option to reduce congestion, not only in Auckland, but our main cities.
So what? Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch?
Christchurch. He also made mention of Tauranga as well, given that that's a budding city. It's almost like the second Auckland now, isn't it? Now, he says that this would work as a sort of toll on motorists who are driving on our busiest roads in particularly peak times, say before or after work. Now, he says that we do need something like this to incentivise motorists to stop using their cars and get on public transport and use things like their bikes instead at peak times. And especially if we want this country to be a carbon zero country in the future, as the government wishes.
Has he got a price tag for that, Maddie? How much does he think we should pay
to be able to drive into town.
He doesn't have a price tag on that, and what he's told me is that he just thinks the government should actually just start looking into it, talking about it, and start throwing those ideas around. But regardless, he does say without a new pricing model, regardless of the price tag that is placed on it, regardless of this, he says that congestion will not reduce if we don't look to introduce something like this. At the moment, the road infrastructure like building and maintenance, the money that we gather to fund those sorts of things, is mostly funded by fuel taxes. And that's not just the likes of the Auckland regional fuel taxes, but there's also a tax added to the price of petrol paid at the pump, and that is then forwarded on to pay for things like roading infrastructure. Now, Chris Nixon says that relying on mostly fuel taxes to fund these sorts of things is not sustainable, particularly as more people look to buy and use electric vehicles. He says at the moment people who are driving around in their Teslas aren't actually paying many, or in fact any fuel taxes at all. So they're really not paying towards any of our roading, our future infrastructure there. Now, within his research, he did look overseas, and he says that congestion charges have worked in places like London, Stockholm, Oslo in Norway, Milan in Italy, and also Singapore closer to home as well. But he does say that implementation of such a charge is key. So he says that the benefits of a congestion charge, as most economists would say, have to outweigh the costs. He also says that the public has to be in on this. The public must think that they are getting a good deal from such a charge. So he suggested things like lowering other taxes like road user charges, possibly getting rid of the regional fuel tax and lowering those fuel taxes. Also, obviously here, making public transport more convenient and frequent would be good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. Well, that one's going to fuel up a debate, isn't it? Excuse the pun.
It will do.
Also, you are aware of New Zealand is a bit tied up in a United States fraud case. What's this all about?
Yeah, I saved the most interesting one till last here, so we don't know all that much about this one, but what I can tell you is that the United States financial regulator, which is called the Securities and Exchange Commission, they came out not so long ago and said that they've linked New Zealand to a multi-million-dollar fraud. Now, within this kind of press release that they put out, they said that they've ordered emergency asset freezes on 3 companies and 3 of those companies' owners. Now, this relates to a fraud case that they've filed in the Colorado Federal District Court. Now, they're alleging that an investment company called Mediatrix Capital basically duped investors to invest money with them from false and misrepresentative statements that they made. Apparently, they allege that this company said that they had never had an unprofitable month based on the super technical algorithm that they used. They said that this algorithm had actually delivered returns of 1,600% since inception. Now, the SEC, which is this United States financial regulator, says that in truth, the scheme actually consistently lost money. In fact, to the tune of 18 million United States dollars in just 2018 alone. They're alleging that these guys operated a sort of Ponzi scheme and actually used about 35 million US dollars of investors' money to fund their lavish lifestyle, buying things like luxury property and cars. Now, at the bottom of the announcement, this is where New Zealand comes in. The SEC said that it appreciates the assistance of, wait for it, the New Zealand Financial Markets Authority. Now, I obviously went to the FMA in this country and said, what is this about? What have you been told about this? Now, they have told me that it receives requests for help and information from overseas regulators through what's called the International Organisation of Securities Commissions. But the details of this are typically confidential. But it did mention to me a company called Blue Isle Markets. Now, that is owned by one of the people that the SEC is pursuing. Now, the address of this company, Blue Isle Markets, is actually listed on the New Zealand Companies Register. And it's listed to the address of the ANZ Centre in central Auckland, in fact, just down the road from us. So that's all of the information I have on that. I have gone to the SEC as well. So,
watch this space.
So certainly watch this space.
Let's have a quick whip around. Just give us the dollar for us, Maddie, before you head off.
That's buying at 62.9 US cents, 92.6 to the Australian, and 50 British pence.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's Madison Reedy with our business update. The Ritchie's bus company has been fined in order to pay $750,000 in reparations to the families of those killed and injured in the 2016 Christmas Eve crash. The bus was carrying 53 people from a Tongan college brass band when it plunged 30 metres down a bank near Gisborne. Ritchie's had earlier pleaded guilty to a charge laid by WorkSafe of failing to ensure people's health and safety was not put at risk. Our reporter Sarah Robson was at the sentencing in Waitakere District Court this morning.
There were 53 people on board the bus when its brakes failed late on Christmas Eve. In court, Judge June Jealous described the moment the driver, Talakai Aholele, lost control of the vehicle on a tight downhill corner.
The bus slid across the centre line onto the Armco railing on the opposite side of the road before rolling over onto its side and sliding on top of the Armco railing for a considerable distance. Mr. Aholele and 9 passengers fell through the glass windows onto the road at this point. The bus then continued over the Armco railing, sliding on its side down into a steep gully where it finally came to rest.
2 people died at the scene, 11-year-old Sione Tamalolo and 33-year-old Talita Fafita. 55-year-old Leotisa Malakai died in hospital 8 days later. 27 others were injured in the crash. Judge Jealous said Sione's family was still struggling to come to terms with their loss.
His father learnt of his son's death on the morning of Christmas Day. The shock was so great for Sione's family, they did not eat for a few days. Coping with the sudden loss of their beloved son and brother has been extremely difficult for the family.
Talita Fafita's husband has found it difficult to cope without his wife.
They had plans to build a home and have more children together. He has not been able to move forward, feeling a loss of energy and frequently feeling emotional. The support from his family, friends and teaching colleagues has been of some assistance to him.
Leotisa Malakai was her family's main breadwinner.
In addition to the emotional impact, the family has suffered a loss of income that has made it difficult for the family to make ends meet. Leotisa's 2 children have been adopted by his sister.
Judge Jealous said one of the injured, Tavita Lokatui, had his leg amputated. Others suffered fractures and lacerations. Before the crash, Judge Jealous told the court that passengers had smelled burning rubber. The driver, Talakai Aholele, stopped the bus in Wairoa to see what was wrong, but he didn't ask for help or notify Ritchie's about the problem. Judge Jealous said Mr. Aholele had been asked by the college group to drive them to Gisborne. An experienced bus driver for Ritchie's, he arranged to hire a bus from the company. Known as a dry hire, Judge Jealous told the court that at the time Ritchie's didn't provide rental agreements for these sorts of hires.
A compliant rental agreement would have included a telephone number to be called during the period of hire and instructions as to what the hirer should do if the vehicle breaks down and needs repair.
Judge Jealous said it was a significant failure.
In my view, the lack of a rental agreement and the general circumstances surrounding Mr. Aholele's hiring of Bus 351 reflect poorly on Ritchie's transport. They do not demonstrate a company operating best practice at that time.
The bus had also missed its 5,000 kilometre service. Hayden Mander from WorkSafe said it was important transport companies like Ritchie's had good processes in place.
They do carry a lot of people around New Zealand, and it's concerning because companies need to make sure that they're looking after the health and safety not only of their own employees but other people that are using their services.
Talakai Aholele was sentenced last year to 5.5 months home detention and had to pay $36,000 in reparations. 3 of Ritchie's directors were in court for the sentencing. In a statement, the company said it accepted the court's decision and said that changes had been made following the crash. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
It's about 12 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Justin Trudeau is scrambling to halt further damage to his re-election campaign after a string of racist images from his past put Canada's image-conscious Prime Minister at the centre of yet another scandal. Less than 5 weeks before the federal election, the Prime Minister's campaign has been rocked by new images emerging of him wearing blackface makeup. CNN's Randy Kay reports.
A young Justin Trudeau, the future Canadian Prime Minister, in new video obtained exclusively by Global News. It's from the early 1990s, and while unclear where it was shot, you can see Trudeau wearing blackface, laughing with his tongue out and his hands in the air. It appears his arms and legs are covered in blackface as well. Trudeau apologized for it all at a press conference late today.
It was blackface, and that is just not right.
That was Trudeau's second apology in less than 24 hours, now having to answer for not one, but 3 instances of wearing blackface, dating back decades. The first was reported by Time magazine Wednesday evening. The picture shows Trudeau at a party at a private school where he worked as a teacher. The theme of the party was Arabian Nights. In this photo from the school's 2000-2001 yearbook, Trudeau is covered in blackface. His neck and hands are also darkened. Trudeau issued an apology late Wednesday.
It was a dumb thing to do. I'm disappointed in myself. I'm pissed off at myself for having done it.
Trudeau, who was nearly 30 when the photo was taken, was asked if he thought it was racist.
Yes, it was. I didn't consider it a racist action at the time, but now we know better.
Along with that apology, Trudeau mentioned another photo, one in which he admitted he wore blackface in a high school talent show. At the time, the photo had not been shared publicly, but within hours, CTV posted it. The network's reporter tweeted the exclusive. Sources have confirmed this is the picture of Justin Trudeau in blackface from high school that he referenced in his press conference. He is singing Day-O, apparently. In the photo, it's clear Trudeau is wearing blackface and an afro wig.
What I did hurt them, hurt people who shouldn't have to face intolerance and discrimination because of their identity. This is something that I deeply, deeply regret.
All of this happening just days after Justin Trudeau announced his re-election campaign. Meanwhile, the apology tour continues.
I've had to reflect on the fact that wanting to do good and wanting to do better simply isn't good enough. This was a terrible mistake.
The Crown has closed its case against a pair accused of what it calls the barbaric torture and murder of an Auckland teenager. Toko Ashley Shane Winter and Kerry Tiamo are on trial in the High Court at Auckland. They're accused of murdering 17-year-old Demetrius Pairama, whose body was found in a drum at an abandoned state house in Mangere last July. Annika Smith reports, and a warning here, her story has some disturbing content.
Over the past 3 weeks, the jury has heard appalling details of the hours leading up to Demetrius Pairama's death. In summing up the Crown's case this morning, Natalie Walker described them as barbaric.
There is no good reason or explanation for why the defendants did what they did to Demetrius Pairama. In that house, on that day, for whatever senseless reason, there was a terrible loss of humanity.
The court has heard Miss Pairama was beaten, stripped naked, tied to a chair, burnt and then asked how she wanted to die before being hanged. The teenager had met the defendants and 2 other teenagers in Auckland CBD last July. The group caught the train to South Auckland and crashed at the derelict State House for the night. It's the Crown's case that Miss Pairama was beaten and tortured the following day and that Miss Winter was in charge. By complete chance, the police showed up at the house looking for a former tenant during the period of alleged abuse and spoke to Miss Pairama and Miss Winter at the door.
The officers were there for no more than about 10 minutes, but even in that short time frame, they formed the view that it was Ashley Winter who was in charge. They said she had more presence, older, more confident, physically bigger, and had a forceful character.
In a series of interviews, Miss Winter told the police she was an innocent bystander before admitting she helped beat and tie up the teenager. She pleaded guilty to kidnapping at the start of the trial. In his closing address today, her lawyer, Matthew Goodwin, said that was the extent of her offending.
She has faced up to what she's done. Yes, it is true that in the early stages of her dealings with the police, Ashley wanted to conceal the truth that she was involved in the kidnapping. But in the end, she opened up to Detective Metcalf and fully explained her role.
Much of what the Crown says happened in the house that day comes from the evidence of a teenager who was there. She has been granted immunity from prosecution in exchange for giving truthful evidence. But Mr Goodwin said she and Mr Tiamo had reason to lie and couldn't be trusted.
You might wonder whether Ashley has become a useful scapegoat for those 2 participants in this drama. The transgender female, the outsider, the stranger who no one else had any loyalty to, whose role has been magnified, exaggerated.
Mr Goodwin made a point of telling the jury Miss Winter was a trans woman today and that it would be wrong to be biased against her. But Mr Tiamo's lawyer, Shane Tate, said the woman's identity was important to the case.
In a trial involving assaults and violence, it's important that we appreciate that she's not in there slapping and hitting like a dainty fish. She's in there with big fists and the strength of a male.
Mr Tiamo pleaded guilty to kidnapping Miss Paidama during the trial. The court heard his DNA was found on one of several nooses at the house, but Mr Tate said this wasn't the slam dunk the Crown claimed it to be. He said it was clear all sides agreed on only one thing.
One of the only things that we rightfully agree at the start of the case is the appalling and terrible treatment that Demetrius Pairama received at that House of Horrors.
Justice Brewer will sum up the case on Monday morning before the jury retires to deliberate. Atuite ko Te Matua ko Annika Smith aho.
And a complete change in direction now, an ad campaign encouraging people to vote in local body elections, which features a poo emoji and the catchphrase, "Give a shit, vote today," has kicked up a stink in New Plymouth. The smiling turd emoji ads appeared on the District Council's website, its Facebook page, and excuse me, and billboards this morning, flushing out a torrent of comments. I think we should just roll the piece, shall we, Calvin?
The website banner features a young woman on a hilltop holding a large poop emoji with the headline, "I give a shit about New Plymouth." Other variations include "I give a shit about mental health" and "I give a shit about water quality." The council's chief executive, Craig Stevenson, was walking down the high street sporting a T-shirt with an "I give a shit" logo on it when RNZ caught up with him today. He's unapologetic about the stink the $30,000 campaign is causing.
Well, obviously, we expected it would spark a reaction, Robin, and it has. We're trying to spark a conversation. We're trying to shake people out of their apathy. Our voter numbers have been declining 3% a year for the last 10 years, so we really want to shift the dial on that.
Mr Stevenson reckons rather than turning their noses up at it, ratepayers are embracing the turd.
We knew it was going to polarise people. We thought, people either love it or hate it, but hey, it started a conversation. I've had dozens of conversations just walking along in my shirt this morning, so I think in that respect it's working.
Council candidate and former communications director of Destination Taranaki, Bruce Gatwood-Cook, says the campaign smells like a winner to him.
My first reaction was to chuckle, and I think that's a good reaction. In terms of cut-through, I think it's working really well. I actually really applaud the District Council for being so creative about it.
Current holder of the mayoral chains, Neil Holdham, declined to comment, saying it was an operational matter, but his rival, Max Bruff, was happy to dump on the idea.
I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to promote a sense of we're doing all these wonderful things, and at least they're having a go. But that's not a cool image. That's not New Plymouth. We need to focus on the real stuff. So the messages are wrong. PR people, there's no place for PR people. It's corporate world.
The campaign didn't wash with youngsters outside Pukeariki today either. Javan was particularly put out.
No, I give a shit about New Plymouth. That's bad. This is my hometown, cuz.
Would that inspire you to vote?
Oh, I vote to change it, yeah. But I wouldn't use it, nah. I give a shit about New Plymouth, nah. Not to vote for, government and shit, to change it, like I said, yeah.
Change that banner?
Yeah, change, take that emoji out, then yeah.
Kale Rufu wasn't feeling the emoji vibe either.
Using emojis and all to relate to the younger youth and all that sort of stuff, the younger voters.
So you reckon that's going to convince you to vote in the local elections?
Not really, because I'm a little bit of old, so I don't really get into the whole lot of using emojis and stuff like that. I'm a bit old school. I like to hear the opinion of everyone and all that, word of mouth.
The general public, it seemed, did at least give a shit.
Well, I know what the emoji is. It's a poo. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's a little bit immature, actually.
Conversation starter and, you know, good or bad, it's getting people talking about it.
There's a lot of money in it. I don't like that. I think we're a bit better than that.
The youth do love a poop emoji. They really do.
Very unusual. I don't know why they would have chosen that.
It's met its aim, basically.
Yeah, it's all good.
Voting ballots began being posted out in New Plymouth today, and the election closes at midday on October the 12th. I ngā mutu mo te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Robin Martin tēnei.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leātawa tēnei. A report has laid bare the hardship being faced by many people in central Otago. The Southern DHB commissioned research earlier this year after hearing anecdotal evidence of housing-related hardship in the district. The draft report says a lack of available homes to buy or rent is driving up prices, and now at the extreme end, people are homeless and sleeping rough. The report says some families are resorting to sleeping in tents at campgrounds, which in turn is affecting children's emotional well-being and school performance. Families fortunate enough to find rentals are settling for homes too small for them, and high rental and mortgage costs means they can't afford to heat their homes. Southern DHB's Primary and Community Medical Director, Dr. Huel Lloyd, says the report's findings are confronting and surprising.
When you travel through central Otago and the Queenstown area, it is such a beautiful place, and there are such beautiful properties that you see, and then there's this kind of underbelly of suffering.
The report recommends the development of a district housing action plan. People on the front line of the Queenstown Lakes housing crisis say the problem is too big to be solved locally. The average property value is almost $1.2 million, and a 3-bedroom rental costs about $750 a week. Stories of low-income workers sleeping shifts in shared beds or sleeping in cars are common. Julie Scott from Queenstown Lakes Community Housing Trust says the district cannot do any more to solve the problem.
We've reached a level now where we need a lot more government assistance. So historically there hasn't been a lot of state housing in the district, what we now call public or social housing, but I think that needs to increase, and we are actually a social housing provider we have a contract with the Ministry of Social Development, but I think the government also needs to step up and build some more houses of its own.
Housing New Zealand says it currently owns and manages 13 properties in the district, but demand is low and it has no plans for more. The jury has heard closing addresses in the trial of a pair accused of torturing and murdering an Auckland teenager. Toko Ashley Shane Winter and Keri Te Amo are on trial in the High Court at Auckland. They're accused of murdering Demetrius Pairama, whose body was found in a drum at an abandoned state house in Mangere last July. Both defendants have now admitted kidnapping the 17-year-old, but dispute their involvement in her death. In summing up the Crown's case, Natalie Walker told the jury the defendants worked together for reasons no one will ever know.
There is no good reason or explanation for why the defendants did what they did to Demetrius Pairama. In that house, on that day, for whatever senseless reason, there was a terrible loss of humanity.
Justice Brewer will sum up the case on Monday morning before the jury retires to deliberate. Police say New Zealand drug users are being targeted by international criminals because they're prepared to pay such a high price for their hit. More than 200 kilograms of methamphetamine has been seized in raids in the Waikato and Bay of Plenty in what police say was a Trans-Tasman operation. Rowan Quinn reports.
The haul's worth $86 million and is one of several by the police and customs since July. Detective Inspector Paul Newman says New Zealand and Australia are being seen as an increasingly attractive market by overseas crime syndicates because users will pay so much. He says meth can cost 3 times what it does in the United States and 30 times what it costs in Mexico. Mr. Newman says the latest seizure was most likely imported from Central America in a Trans-Tasman operation. 2 New Zealanders and an Australian have been charged with possessing methamphetamine for supply. Ko Rowan Quinn, DNA.
A judge has criticised the failure by a bus company to provide a rental agreement for one of its drivers before the 2016 Christmas Eve bus crash. The bus was carrying 53 people from a Tongan college brass band when it plunged down a bank near Gisborne. 3 people were killed and 27 others injured. In the Waitakere District Court today, Ritchie's was fined $210,000 and ordered to pay $750,000 in reparations. The company had earlier pleaded guilty to failing to ensure people's health and safety was not put at risk. Judge June Jella said when Ritchie's hired out buses to its drivers, it didn't provide agreements with information about what to do if something went wrong. She said that reflected poorly on the company. Ritchie's said it accepted the court's decision and had made changes. 3 district health boards in the Auckland region are working together so recently arrived measles vaccines go to those who need it most. Auckland, Waitemata and Counties Manukau DHBs say doses need to be carefully managed across the region, including the 52,000 doses that arrived in New Zealand a few days ago. They say babies and children scheduled for vaccinations at 12 months and 4 years get priority. The boards say GPs can also use their clinical judgment to give doses to 5 to 29-year-olds. 100,000 more doses have been ordered and will arrive in the next few months. It's 6:05. Nerves aren't an issue for hosts Japan as they count down to tonight's Rugby World Cup tournament opener against Russia in Tokyo, according to assistant coach Tony Brown. Brown and his fellow former All Black Jamie Joseph are at the helm of the Brave Blossoms, and Brown says while it's a big occasion for the nation, the players are more than ready.
Yeah, that's always a challenge, but I think we've got quite an experienced group around our leadership with Ritchie and Luke Thompson, Fumiaki Tanaka. So those guys got the team under control around nerves and they understand what they have to do tomorrow night. So, it's been an enjoyable preparation week and, one that hasn't been too nervous at all.
Meanwhile, the Springboks will have an image of the late Chester Williams embedded in their jersey numbers for their World Cup opener against the All Blacks in Yokohama tomorrow night. Williams, who was a member of South Africa's 1995 World Cup winning side and inspired a new generation of black players to take up rugby, died earlier this month. Supercar driver Jamie Whincup has escaped a ban for comments aimed at race officials following Sunday's controversial race in Auckland. Australian Motorsport had threatened to throw the book at Whincup after comments questioning officials' professionalism following a controversial safety car period which marred the 200-kilometre race. Whincup passed the safety car without permission after being incorrectly identified as the race leader. The sport's governing body described the comments as disgraceful and offensive, but Whincup has apologised and no further action is being taken. That's the news.
Where is it? Show me.
This week, Country Life sniffing out truffles with Indy, the Cocker Spaniel.
Yes. Good girl, Indy. Let's have a look down here. Let me have a sniff.
It just looks like a clump of dirt to me.
Well, hopefully it's not. That's broken a piece of truffle off. You can see the veins in there.
Oh,
it's a good black
really
truffle.
Good truffle.
I think I'll put some on my steak tonight.
Country Life Fridays at 9 during nights and Saturday mornings after the 7 o'clock news on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow for Northland, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Cloudy periods and isolated showers gradually clearing and fine breaks increasing tomorrow. For Auckland, cloud clearing this afternoon and becoming fine. For the remainder of the North Island, fine apart from cloud morning and night and isolated showers in Taihape and Wellington. Nelson, Buller, Westland and Fiordland, fine but isolated showers developing in Fiordland and Westland tomorrow. Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mostly fine, however areas of cloud and isolated showers for North Canterbury and the Kaikoura coast tonight. Chatham Islands partly cloudy, a few showers developing late tomorrow. RNZ National, it's coming up to 8.5 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. There's been another huge haul of methamphetamine with police saying Kiwi drug users are being targeted because they are prepared to pay a premium for their high. Police have seized 216 kilos of meth in raids in the Waikato and Bay of Plenty as a result of a Trans-Tasman drug operation. Detective Inspector Paul Newman says he thinks they were imported from Central America.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more international crime syndicates showing interest in this part of the world, and it's simply because of the high price that we pay for our drugs. So to give you an example, if you were to pick up a kilo of methamphetamine in a place like Mexico, it would cost you around $4,000 US. If you put it over the border into the United States, about $40,000. But if you ship it to New Zealand or Australia, you're looking at anywhere between $100,000 and $150,000. I guess it's just scale, and the ready markets and large markets on their doorstep means that the price remains low due to a large customer base. I guess we've got a smaller customer base. It's pretty much like economics. These criminals are at the heart of it, business people trying to peddle their wares. Unfortunately, the wares that they peddle create a tremendous amount of social harm.
The big hauls are becoming increasingly common, with police capturing more than a tonne since July. Mr Newman says police have worked with their Western Australian counterparts and have charged 2 New Zealanders and an Australian with possessing methamphetamine for supply. He says the drugs represent about 4 months' worth of stock and are worth about $86 million.
It's unfortunately large, and we're seeing larger amounts all the time in our operations. This part of the world is really seen as one market, and both countries pay similar prices. So we're seeing a lot of collaboration between crime syndicates, and we have been forced to collaborate more and more with our overseas law enforcement partners.
Detective Inspector Paul Newman of the Police's National Organised Crime Group. While tonight's opening ceremony and opening match in Tokyo between hosts Japan and Russia at the Rugby World Cup are the major focus for today, the All Blacks went through their captain's run this afternoon ahead of tomorrow night's highly anticipated pool clash with the Springboks in Yokohama. This morning, though, several All Blacks, including halfback TJ Perenara, visited the Fukutoku Shrine in Chaochu, Tokyo, to soak up more of the unique Japanese culture and history. Rugby reporter Joe Porter was there.
TJ, a lot of the beauty of the World Cup is the chance to experience another culture and travel to another part of the world. How have you enjoyed it so far in Japan?
Oh man, it's been awesome, mate. Japanese people have been very welcoming. Everywhere we've been, everyone's pretty excited to have us here, and then just the love and the aroha that people have been giving us, man, it's been next level. So the boys have really enjoyed it. I've definitely enjoyed my time so far and looking forward to a little bit more.
Did you notice any parallels between the Japanese culture and Māori culture?
Yeah, where we just went was a lot like a marae actually. So I know times have changed now and there's a lot of skyscrapers around, but that was sort of the central hub of where I guess you would call in Māori our iwi would go, and that, from what I heard from the lady who spoke with us, that's exactly how it was here. So a lot of the community was centralised around the temple there, and for us that's what we would do on marae. So yeah, I did notice a lot of similarities with Māori culture.
And do you find that as an All Black, there's chances and these privileges to come to these sorts of places and soak up these kinds of experiences help, I guess, shape you and around you as a man?
Yeah, 100%. If you can open your mind to different perspectives and the way different people see the world, and you gain an understanding for it's why other people do what they do, and then you understand yourself a little bit more too. And if at the least you grow your values a little bit more, well, that's what I believe anyway. So having that ability to have a really open mind about how other people do things in this world and trying to understand different people's perspectives, I think does grow you as a human.
Certainly helps build empathy, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And then with that, a lot of things I guess can be solved. A lot of I don't quite know how to word it, but
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah,
if you could walk a mile in someone else's shoes, it would enlighten a lot of people.
Well, exactly. That's bang on. So our ability to have empathy for people comes through understanding different people's perspectives and where different people come from and why people think a certain way. So if we don't step out of our box and start to have that understanding, start to listen to people, you know, you only have your own views on the world. You only see the world through your glasses. So if you're only doing that, then there's no room for empathy. There's no room for understanding.
All Blacks halfback TJ Perenara speaking with our sports reporter Joe Porter. And tomorrow's All Blacks South Africa matchup is being touted as a possible eventual matchup for the final on November 2. If you haven't subscribed to Spark to watch the games live, there are plenty of venues around the country screening the match live. We sent Alex Perrottet and cameraman Nick Munro to the Backyard pub in Hillcrest on Auckland's North Shore to meet South African-born General Manager Roger van Kempen Kempen to find out what's planned for tomorrow.
Righto. So Roger, this is the backyard pub. Has it always been grass on the floor here? It's all very green. So it looks like it could be sort of Springboks focused.
Well, we did. No, it wasn't always green, but we put it in there. I'd like to think it would be for the Springboks, but it's actually because it's the backyard.
It's just the backyard. There's a lot of other greenery. I almost feel like you need a passport to get in here for an All Black fan.
Have you got your passport?
Okay, so it's the 79th minute, and the scores are even, and the Springboks get a winning field goal.
Yeah.
Have you got enough security on site?
I got Byron over there. He's always willing to help out, and Craig, he'll stake in. Hey, Craig. Well, there's a couple of screens, a couple of areas. I've got one out the back on that side. Mm-hmm. This will be the main area of it, and then also in our function room over there, there's another big screen in there, which we're planning to fill up with a bunch of South Africans. I think there's about 90 odd there we've got going in that side.
What are you actually going to separate people?
Well, don't you start with that. All the games, not only New Zealand games, but obviously New Zealand will be our big ones. New Zealand, South Africa, but all the games. Like even tonight, we'll be showing the Russia-Japan opening. Argentina, France, every. There's a lot of stuff going on our Facebook page. Just telling you which games are coming up.
Got the Aussies and the Fijians playing tomorrow afternoon too.
Yes, we're putting on that one too. So that'll be interesting. In fact, all these opening ones are quite big, so there'll be a lot of drink specials I obviously can't name. All right,
but it's not like free drinks before first points or anything.
Yeah. Who makes money like that, mate?
So this is the kitchen. So I imagine you're going to put a bit of food on for the guests tomorrow night.
It is a late game, but we're still going to have our menu open.
Yeah.
A lot of things here. We've got our head chef here, Anthony.
What are you cooking up?
We're doing a mac and cheeseburger, truffle mac and cheese for the game for tomorrow. Come on down and try it. It's going to be delish.
That's nice. What's the next stage after that?
I've got to add some more seasoning, some truffle paste. We're going to make it really nice. Come down and try it.
What's the cost on that one?
Looking about $22 to $24. So not too bad, not too expensive, but really good.
Try the side of chips?
Of course. We're going to go all the works.
Yeah, there's only one late game for the All Blacks, so that's 11:45. So, but all the rest, 5:30 in the afternoon. Fantastic timing.
Yeah, and you're going to watch most of them here?
Probably. Yeah, except for the late one. Yeah, probably just watch that on the phone or something. Yeah.
Have you? You've obviously been here a few times in the past. What's the mood going to be like?
Yeah, a lot of banter. Yeah, there'll be quite a few South Africans here, been on the North Shore.
I hear that you're trying to keep them all out the back.
No, look, I know quite a few of them already, but it's all good fun, no problems at all.
And then who do you think is going to win the cup?
You probably wouldn't like this, but I think England have got a good shot. Yeah, I think they're flying under the radar, and I think, they'll have a good shot this year.
You're obviously getting ready very early for the game.
Oh, yes, most definitely, as you can see.
And I can see the colours you're wearing there. You've been in that all day?
Oh, yes, most definitely. Got to work this morning, and the boss locked the door and closed in my face and said, "You're not coming in here with that bloody shirt on."
Well, there you have it. Things are actually starting to pick up here at the Backyard Pub. Crowds are coming in. You can hear the band playing in the background. They're all here tonight, of course, because the Rugby World Cup does kick off. There's the opening ceremony. The hosts, Japan, are playing Russia. But, of course, tomorrow, that big Pool B clash between the Springboks and the All Blacks. Could the All Blacks take out the third Rugby World Cup in a row on November the 2nd? Who knows? There's a lot of rugby to be played before then, and people will be tuning in at home or coming to venues like this, the Backyard Pub in Hillcrest. I guess may the best team win. I think we all know who that is.
Yeah, we do, Alex Perrottet, there at the Backyard Pub in Hillcrest. The big match in Yokohama kicks off at 9:45 p.m. local time tomorrow. Today was another day in Britain to shake your head in disbelief. It was the day when the lawyer for the former Conservative Prime Minister, John Major, was in the Supreme Court comparing the current Conservative Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, to a dodgy real estate agent. At issue was whether Mr Johnson had improper motives for suspending Parliament for 5 weeks in the run-up to Brexit. 11 justices of the Supreme Court have now finished their 3 days of hearings into whether that suspension, or prorogation, to give it its precise term, was lawful. A judgment is expected at the start of next week. The BBC's Clive Coleman reports.
You had to pinch yourself. A former Conservative Prime Minister intervening in a case at the highest court in the land to support allegations the current Tory Prime Minister gave misleading advice to the Queen to suspend Parliament because he wanted to silence it. In written submissions, Sir John Major drew a comparison between Mr Johnson and an estate agent who misled sellers and was found in breach of his duties. The Prime Minister's duty to the monarch could hardly be less than that of an estate agent to a homeowner, Sir John contended. His barrister, Lord Garnier QC, told the court the reasons put forward by the Prime Minister for the prorogation could not be true.
Whatever its intent, its effect was plainly to mislead. We know that because it misled even a member of the Cabinet, the Culture Secretary. But we also know, of course, that the day after that, the Defence Secretary gave the game away, and you have the interview of him.
Closing for the government, Lord Keane QC reiterated that prorogation was a political minefield and forbidden territory for the courts. When asked whether the government would give an undertaking to comply with any declaration it had acted unlawfully, Lord Keane replied,
"It is not for the executive to give undertakings to obey the law. The executive does obey the law, and if the courts tell us what the law is, we will address that."
However, a government submission to the court suggested the Prime Minister could, depending on the nature of a declaration of unlawfulness, shut down Parliament again. A shot across the bows, perhaps, of the 11 justices who now have the task of deciding, firstly, if they're allowed to rule on prorogation, and if they are, whether a Prime Minister of the United Kingdom misled the monarch and undermined a sovereign parliament, with all the seismic, legal, constitutional and political ramifications that would entail. Judgment will be given early next week.
And that was Clive Coleman reporting. When Kiwi teenagers reach 16 years old, they can legally get a gun licence, have sex and even get married, but they're not allowed to vote. But a campaign is underway to change that, with young people keen to have their case heard in court. Harry Locke reports.
Back in 1969, Neil Armstrong took the first step on the moon. The Beatles did their last public performance, and young New Zealanders had to be 21 to vote. The voting age dropped to 18 in 1974, and there it stayed. But now a youth-led campaign called Make It 16 is calling for New Zealand to join the other 11 countries, including Austria, Brazil and Scotland, by having a minimum voting age of 16. The campaign group wants to take the issue to court, arguing that not allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to vote is a form of age discrimination. Member of Make It 16 Pearson Palmer says he feels the youth aren't being taken seriously.
I'm someone who's pretty engaged in politics, and I'm getting kind of tired of being, listening to adults being very condescending, knowing that we actually, in the long run, have no say. And in the end, our points of views are kind of being trivialized by politicians and by people who are older than us just because of our age.
He hopes lowering the voting age will highlight issues that especially affect young people.
Hope that this would mean political parties are considering our points of view a lot more. There are obviously a lot of huge issues that are to do with youth that aren't being considered right now, such as mental health. And we hope that us actually having a say will mean that political parties will be forced to actually come to the table and consider our problems.
But political commentator Liam Heye, a Manawatu lawyer, says 16-year-olds aren't developed enough to vote.
I'm against that. We shouldn't be changing the electorate to include children. Children still have developing brains.
Liam Heye, who was formerly active in the National Party, says he speaks from experience when he says people that age aren't mature enough.
I knew that I wasn't. When you're 16 or 17, you're still in school. You're subject to a whole lot of influences. You haven't had a lot of experience outside the family or living on your own. And, with that experience comes a lot of perspective that you actually just don't have as a child.
He adds that if the voting age was reduced, so should the age at which people can sit on a jury.
Now, nobody in their right mind thinks that a 16 and 17-year-old should be sitting on jury. If you say, well, lower one but not the other, well, why? Because really those two ideas are tied up in that idea of civic responsibility.
Only about 60% of 18 to 24-year-olds are currently enrolled. That's the lowest of all age groups. But Waikato University political scientist Dr. Patrick Barrett says giving younger teens the vote could help increase youth turnout.
Lowering the voting age, if it was implemented alongside a more comprehensive program of citizenship education in schools, could be quite influential and quite powerful, actually, in terms of promoting that wider sense of civic culture and active citizenship.
However, the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says lowering the voting age to 16 is not an immediate focus for the government.
What we've prioritised as a government, first and foremost, is making sure that those who are eligible to vote now are doing so, and that we have good civic education in our schools to prepare young people for voting.
The last time the voting age was reduced in New Zealand, youth protests in response to the Vietnam War were largely responsible. The Make It 16 campaign leaders are hoping the role of young people in the current climate strikes could persuade legislators to lower it again. For Checkpoint, Harry Locke.
It's almost 6:25 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Is he optimistic or does he just have too much money? We're wondering which applies to the man who has bet $50,000 on New Zealand to win the World Cup. And that same bloke has bet another $50,000 that the All Blacks will win every game. So what are the odds of a clean sweep? And if you're thinking of having a flutter, what's the best value option for a cheeky fiver? TAB's rugby bookmaker Mark Stafford ends the week for us with the long and short of World Cup betting. Hi Mark, that combined $100,000 bet, what are the odds on that?
Yeah, well, if he's right on both counts, he's outlaid $100,000 and he'll get back $265,000. If they were to lose one along the way, and the most likely one for them to lose, and I'm certainly not saying they will, would be the first one against South Africa, but then go on and still win the tournament, he'll still make a profit of $12,500. So I guess he's sort of covered himself a little bit.
Yeah. Hey, so what is proving popular at the moment? Where's all the action?
Well, the smarter ones, and I've done some homework for you, Lisa, because I know you've got $10 or $20 burning a hole in your pocket. So I've looked at a couple of long-range options. The first one, player of the tournament. Okay, so normally that comes from the team that will win. Most of New Zealand think the All Blacks will win. Player of the tournament, I think Ardie Savia. He was the player of Super Rugby. I think he's been the best player for the All Blacks in the Rugby Championship, and he's paying $15. So your $10, Lisa, will turn into $150. Or if you want to go a little bit wider and something worth a lot of money, George Bridge, who I think could be the breakout player.
George Bridge from Gisborne, my hometown. Yes, now you're talking to me. Yeah.
I was born there as well.
Oh, yes. Snap. How much is he going to win us if he's player of the tournament?
Your $10 would turn into $510 if he got player of the tournament. And the other one I fancy is top try scorer in the tournament. So you look for the teams that have the easiest games and they'll rack up lots of tries. Who's got the easiest group? New Zealand, because we've got Italy, Canada and Namibia. And we could quite easily score 10 tries against each of those. Now, I'm going to go Rico Ioane because I think he'll start in 2 of those 3 games and he could get 4 or 5 tries in each game. And he's paying $11. So I think Rico, top try scorer, and Ardie for the player of the tournament, and a sneaky little side investment on poverty-based George Bridge.
Okay. Now, Springboks All Black game. Who is the favourite to win, and what are the odds at the moment?
Yep, New Zealand are quite strongly favoured. They're 7-point favourites. South Africa are paying over $3 to win the whole thing. Interestingly, and before a game's been played, and in fact, right through the tournament, you can bet on who the finalists are going to be, who's going to meet in the final. And over half the money, there's all the different combinations you can have. Over half the money is on New Zealand, South Africa to meet again in the final at $3.75. That's a pretty short favourite with so many games in the way and so many things that can happen to stop that happening. But New Zealanders are emphatic that New Zealand and South Africa will meet in the final.
Yeah, among those people who are emphatic is Alex Perrottet, our reporter here. He's telling me that is exactly what is going to happen. Now, Mark, what have you put your money on?
Well, I think there's only 3 teams that can win it, New Zealand, South Africa and England. So I'm ashamed to say I've put a little saver because if New Zealand don't win it, I'm going to be devastated. But I've put a little saver bet on England and South Africa to meet in the final, paying $11. Not because I want it to happen, but if New Zealand lose somewhere along the way, I want a little opportunity to make some money.
Oh, Mark, I think you've just jinxed us with that. I'm sorry.
I hope not.
Hey, one before you go, the biggest kind of the bet that's paying the big dividends, what is it at the moment?
The biggest dividends would be something like Uruguay or Namibia to pay the World Cup, paying $1,000.
Well,
It
I
ain't
think
happening, Lisa.
I know. I'll save my $20 there for George. Hey, thanks so much for that. Appreciate your time. Mark Stafford there giving us the odds on the Rugby World Cup if you are feeling like a bit of a flutter. Just before we go, a lot of feedback on watching the Rugby World Cup and Spark. Not much faith in the fact that it's going to work. A lot of people saying that they thought they had a smart TV. They've gone out to check it. It's not the right model. This person says, last night tested out our smart TV. It's one model before the compatible smart TVs. Now I've had to go out and buy a $100 Chromecaster to make it work so our family can watch the rugby tomorrow. Another person, similar situation, saying, do I really have to spend another $70? I thought that being Spark customers forever and having a relatively new TV, we would be fine. We're in our 70s and didn't expect to have to jump through all these hoops, especially having been Sky Sports subscribers for many years too, when viewing sport was simple. One on a different topic, housing in central Otago. My daughter's paying $200 for a top bunk in a scruffy house with 12 people.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A new report on the housing affordability crisis in Queenstown and central Otago calls for a district housing action plan. A judge has criticised Ritchie's for failing to provide a rental agreement for one of its drivers before the fatal 2016 Christmas Eve bus crash. Young New Plymouth residents have poured scorn on an ad campaign featuring a poop emoji designed to get them to vote in the local body elections. The Telecommunication Users Association says live streaming the Rugby World Cup on Spark Sport starting tonight must go well. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
All the teams have been welcomed so specially, and I guess a way that represents the Japanese hospitality. That is second to none.
Lately with me.